let's help.
Please let's help.
To lift up each other's voices.
To lift up each other's voices.
Questions?
Questions?
Question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why
Why
don't we understand
don't we understand
ourselves
ourselves
as part of nature?
as part of nature?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Fantastic important to understand that.
Fantastic. Important to understand that.
It goes very, very deep.
It goes very, very deep.
Because human beings have human nature.
Because human beings have human nature.
But our human nature is the capacity to transform nature.
Is the capacity to transform nature.
And we are, in my view, that part of nature which expresses nature's own transformative power.
That part of nature which expresses nature's own transformative power.
This does not make us higher than any other creature.
This does not make us higher than any other creature.
And in fact, it gives rise to endless problems,
And in fact, it gives rise to endless problems,
including all of the constructions of gender,
including all the constructions of gender,
which by the way,
which, by the way,
are an enormous issue within the discourse of ecosocialism.
are an enormous issue in the discourse of ecosocialism.
And the principal modality of that,
And the principal modality of that,
without which, in my view, ecosocialism cannot exist,
without which, in my view, ecosocialism cannot exist,
is that ecosocialism must also be ecofeminism.
is that ecosocialism must also be ecofeminism.
And this has to do
This has to do
with the estrangement from nature,
with the estrangement from nature,
which goes deep into the human condition,
which goes deep into the human condition,
and is written about in all of the texts,
and is written about in all of the texts
Written about
all of the texts.
of ancient wisdom.
of ancient wisdom.
But the common feature of that
This common feature of that
is something that I would call,
is something that I would call,
and please forgive it if this sounds a little like jargon,
and please forgive it if it sounds a little like jargon,
the gendered bifurcation of nature.
the gendered bifurcation of nature.
Degendered
bifurcation of nature.
The degendered bifurcation.
And
you know that
under the aegis of patriarchal systems,
under the aegis of patriarchal systems,
truly human is considered the male,
The truly human is considered a male,
the female is the more closer to nature.
and the female is closer to nature,
Also mediates nature to the male.
also mediates nature to the male.
Extremely destructive delusion.
Now this is an extremely destructive
But
delusion,
it's real as a delusion.
but it's real as a delusion.
And so we have to work through this problem also, and that takes a lot more than I can say now.
And so we have to work through this problem, and that takes a lot more than I can say now.
But I do regard
But I do regard
the human nature boundary
the human nature boundary
between humanity and nature
the boundary between humanity and nature
as a fascinating and very fundamental problem
as a fascinating and very fundamental problem
that we should study all our lives.
that we should study all our lives.
Other questions?
There's so much more to talk about. Yes.
Are there other examples other than the Indians
Are there other examples other than the Indians
of societies that share resources in a reasonable way?
that share resources in a reasonable way?
I think it's a contentious point
I think it is a contentious point
amongst anthropologists,
amongst anthropologists,
but I think
think
it's only a contentious point
it's only a contentious point
because anthropologists
because anthropologists
are schooled
are schooled
in capitalist institutions.
in capitalist institutions.
And And anything of the sort, you always have to submit
And anything of the sort, you always have to submit
to an ideological critique,
to an ideological critique,
which means the way in which knowledge
which means the way in which knowledge
legitimates and reinforces and naturalizes systems of power.
the systems of power.
Now, having said that, I would say that once one's mind is clear, you will see that obviously all human beings and all human societies have the germ of being able to go to pieces and screw up. That is truly part of human nature. Nonetheless, every intelligent student of the history of humankind must conclude that the first peoples, whether in North America, Polynesian Islands, Siberia, in Southern Africa, or wherever, were originally classless and did not have systems of oppression, but the way of not sharing. They shared everything.
And did not have systems of not sharing. They shared everything.
And that was really a matter of survival also. So it is an absolute truth in my view. That humanity, in order to emerge, were originally communists. Now, it's a big question as to how we cease to be that way. And how, in other words, the class system arose. In which one small group, the 1% in the lingo of the Occupy movement and of our society now. Came to control production of wealth for the rest of the society. My view, and it's only a view, is that I think it has a great deal to do with the peculiarities of males. And the propensity of hunting bands to become freaks. And start hunting other people. Rather than simply providing the means of subsistence. There's much more again to say about this. But I fear I will go on too long. But if you want me, I'll keep talking about it.
Other questions?
Hello, I'm Echo. It's so great to see you here, Joel. And to hear this wonderful audience learning. How can we heal the injustices of our colonial inheritance without getting mired and so forth.
It's a very big question. I think there's one word
I think there's one word
that doesn't provide any magic to the answer.
that doesn't provide any magic to the answer,
But it gives you a way of developing a methodology.
but it gives you a way of developing a methodology.
And that word is prefiguration.
And that word is prefiguration.
It requires us to see
It requires us to see
requires our vision.
I say to see because it requires our
And
vision
indeed our imagination.
and indeed our imagination
What is
and what
immortal about humanity.
and what is immortal about humanity.
That my great, most important influence in my whole life is William Blake.
That my great and most important influence in my life is William Blake,
Who talked about to see a world in a grain of sand,
who talked about to see a world in a grain of sand
and a heaven in a wild flower.
and heaven in a wild flower.
Hold infinity in the palm of your hand,
Hold infinity in the palm of your hand
and eternity in an hour.
and eternity in an hour.
Now this vision that we are born with
Now this vision that we are born with
is stifled
is stifled
and crushed
and crushed
and alienated
and alienated
by class society
by class society
and its fetishisms
and its fetishism
and the rule of money,
and the rule of money,
all those other things. But
all these other things.
But it comes into the world.
But it comes into the world
Every person who is born,
with every person who's born.
and that vision
And that vision,
is capable of imagining a better world,
capable of imagining a better world,
seeing its germination
seeing its germination
into this world.
into this world.
And that's why I said I could have said much more in my talk, but I wanted to emphasize
I could have said much more in my talk, but I wanted to emphasize
the notion of the commons as a creative intervention
the notion of the commons as a creative intervention
that goes back to the past and points towards the future.
that goes back to the past and points towards the future.
So it is a question of seeing what we're doing on the skein of S-K-E-I-N of time.
What we're doing is seeing S-K-A-I-N of time.
And regarding each and every act
Regarding each and every act
as a motion of regaining
as a motion of regaining
what once was
what once was
in order to gain what can be.
in order to gain what can be.
Now that of course sounds very mystical,
Now that of course sounds very mystical,
but it also
is
is very practical.
very practical.
It means that if you plant an organic garden,
It means if you plant an organic garden,
or say if you plant a garden,
or say that you plant a garden,
you realize it's better to plant an organic garden.
you'll realize it's better to plant an organic garden.
And then you realize that it's better to have a collective that does the garden.
Then you realize it's better to have a collective that does the
Then
gardening.
you realize that collective is going to be subject to quote-unquote market forces.
Then you realize that collective is going to be subjected to so-called market forces.
So then next thing you know, you're developing
So the next.
a theory and practice of agroecology.
So then next thing you know, you're developing a theory and practice of agroecology.
And you're constantly moving forward
And you're constantly moving forward
by also resisting what is outside.
by also resisting what is outside.
In the capitalist world that seeks to crush you.
In the capitalist world that seeks to crush you.
That's why I said that a true commons
That's why I said that a true commons
has to be both resistant and productive.
has to be both resistant and productive.
And develop freely associated labor, as Marx put it.
And develop freely associated labor, as Marx put it.
In my view, the simplest definition of the eco-socialist path
The simplest definition of the eco-socialist path
is that which gathers freely associated and frees people to be who they can be.
gathers freely associated and frees people to be who they can be.
That is to say, frees their visionary capacities.
That is, it frees their visionary capacity.
Breaking with the alienation of the capitalist production system.
Breaking the alienation of the capitalist production system.
To go back, it's freely associated labor.
So to go back, it is freely associated labor
With, however, ecocentric ethics.
with, however, ecocentric ethics.
That is to say, there's a conscious effort
That is to say, a conscious effort
to see nature as within us and also us within nature.
To see nature within us and also us within nature.
To think of the kinds of connections we can form.
To think of the kinds of connections we can form
As ecosystems of a certain kind.
as ecosystems of a certain kind.
And to gradually, but nonetheless steadily,
Gradually, but nonetheless steadily,
break down the commodity form.
to break down the commodity form,
Go beyond the tyranny of money.
to go beyond the tyranny of money,
And eventually produce not commodities but ecosystems themselves.
and eventually produce not commodities but ecosystems themselves.
Every concrete instance,
In every concrete instance,
you have to be close to the ground and see that in a very tangible way.
you have to be close to the ground and see that in a very tangible way.
Even as you are looking into eternity and infinity.
Even as you are looking into eternity and infinity.
That's our human capacity,
But that's our human capacity,
which is crushed in this system,
which is crushed in this system,
turned into consumerism, fashion, all the bullshit,
turned into consumerism, fashion, all bullshit,
and militarism and the industrialization and the academy and all this
militarism and industrialization and the academy and all that crap.
all chains and fetters that hold back
And all chains and fetters that hold back
the immortal human imagination,
the immortal human imagination,
can only be realized in collective activity
which can only be realized in collective activity
and in going beyond the self.
and in going beyond the self.
And this is my humble view of it.
And this is my humble view of it.
Except I'm not really.
Because I'm not really humble.
More questions?
I appreciate very much
I appreciate very much
the fact that you have taken you time
the fact that you have taken your time
to come and talk to us.
to come and talk to us.
I also think
I also think
that you probably have spent a lot of time thinking,
that you also spent a lot of time thinking,
which nowadays is a luxury.
which nowadays is a luxury,
And that is why I have a question to you and everybody else.
and that is why I have a question to you and everybody else.
It has been bothering me for very long now
It has been bothering me for very long now
that not anyone
that not anyone
talks about the consequence on the planet
talks about the consequence on the planet
of taking so much oil and natural gas,
of taking so much oil and natural gas,
providing whatever desires we have,
providing whatever desires we have,
but at the same time,
but at the same time,
we are affecting the planet's structure.
we are affecting the planet's structure.
What is happening to those spaces that we're leaving empty when we take out what we do?
What is happening to those spaces when we take out what we use?
So that is a question for anyone that has thought of this.
So that is a question to anyone who has thought of this.
And just to recap,
And just to recap,
the concern that I have
the concern that I have
is that the petroleum,
is that the petroleum,
the natural gas,
the natural gas,
whatever else comes from the earth,
whatever else comes from the earth,
when we extract it,
it
it leaves open or empty spaces.
leaves open or empty spaces.
And then think about
And then think about
all the earthquakes,
all the earthquakes,
all the climate changes
all the climate changes
that are happening now.
that are happening now.
Any ideas?
Any ideas?
May I comment?
May I comment?
Of course.
Thank you.
You're fundamentally very right in what you're saying.
You're fundamentally very right in what you're saying.
First of all, there really are a lot of people
But first of all, there really are a lot of people
who are trying to come to grips with this problem.
who are trying to come to grips with this problem.
And we should all understand what they are doing and what this is about.
And we should all understand what they are doing and what this is about.
It's hard for me to know where to begin.
It's hard for me to know where to begin.
But just let me say a couple of things.
But just let me say a couple of things.
The extraction of hydrocarbons in all minerals.
The extraction of hydrocarbons in all minerals
Definitely has a damaging effect on the planet.
definitely has a damaging effect on the planet.
This effect has becoming enormously aggravated
This effect has become enormously aggravated
because there's a perception
because there is a perception
that we are running out of hydrocarbon fuels.
that we are running out of hydrocarbon fuels.
That's called peak oil phenomenon,
That's called peak oil phenomenon,
and it's a perception
and it's a perception
that more or less drives the capitalist class
that more or less drives the capitalist class
crazy
crazy
and forces them.
and forces them.
You must understand the capitalists, although they have all the wealth,
Which you must understand, the capitalists, although they have all the wealth,
first of all, they're never satisfied.
first of all, they're never satisfied.
Second of all, they never understand anything.
Second of all, they never understand anything.
And they're totally in the grip of their need to accumulate capital.
And they're totally in the grip of their need to accumulate capital.
If one of them drops out and comes to his senses,
If one of them drops out and comes to his senses,
he'll be replaced by somebody right behind him.
he'll be replaced by somebody right behind him.
So the capitalist is a personification of capital.
So the capitalist is a personification of capital.
He may go home and be nice to his kids.
He may go home and be nice to his kids,
When he comes to work,
but when he comes to work,
he sees to it that he's building a world that will destroy his kids.
he sees to it that he's building a world that will destroy his kids.
This has become much worse recently
And this has become much worse recently
because capital is always in crisis.
because capital is always in crisis.
Crisis has grown and has become intractable.
And crisis has grown and has become intractable.
And that truly is the reason that these movements are breaking out.
And that truly is the reason that these movements are breaking out.
And setting aside the economic part,
And setting aside the economic part,
we do see,
say
that there's a much heightened and much more destructive race for resources.
that there has been a much heightened and destructive race for natural
And
resources,
especially energy resources.
and especially energy resources.
And it is diabolic what they're doing.
And it is diabolic what they're doing.
They're taking on, and you know this,
And you know this.
moving the tops of mountains
Removing the tops of mountains
to get coal.
to get coal.
They're destroying the province of Alberta,
They're destroying the province of
the
Alberta,
whole province of Canada,
the whole province of Canada,
to get oil out of the ground.
to get oil out of the ground,
It takes more energy to get it out
which takes more energy to get it out
than the oil will burn.
than the oil will burn.
They're drilling for the oil, and remember last year in 2010,
They're drilling for the oil, and remember last year in 2010,
what happened in the Gulf of Mexico.
what happened in the Gulf of Mexico.
Remember, you see the signs here with the fracking, what they're going to do for gas.
You see the signs here about the fracking, what they're going to do for gas.
And then some particular fools and idiots say, well, because it also produces climate change.
And then some particular fools and idiots say, well, because it's going to produce climate change,
Because of the carbon.
because of the carbon,
Let's replace it with nuclear power.
let's replace it with nuclear power.
Nuclear power.
Nuclear power,
Just like Japan.
just like Japan.
I was with some people from the Fukushima region of Japan.
I was with some people from the Fukushima region of Japan.
This has laid waste to this great country.
This is laid waste to the great country.
Okay. So all of these pathways
All of these pathways
are false dead-end pathways.
are false dead-end pathways.
Immediate surface of the ecological crisis
The immediate surface of the ecological
has
crisis
a great deal to do with reckless and ruthless energy economy.
Has a great deal to do with the reckless and useless energy economy. Ruthless.
Now, in a few weeks, I'm going to go with my friend Quincy here and some others.
In a few weeks, I'm going to go with my friend Quincy here and some others.
We're going to have a presence in Durban, South Africa.
We're going to have a presence in Durban, South Africa.
The UN is having what they call a COP17 session.
Where the UN is having a COP17 session.
They had 16 before, and it was all a disaster.
They had 16 before, and it was all a disaster.
Because they're all controlled by capital.
Because they're all controlled by capital.
And now, however, people are rising across the planet.
People are rising across the planet.
There may be tens of thousands of people in Durban, which is a city of great historical tradition of resistance.
There may be tens of thousands of people in Durban, which is a city of historical significance.
Trying to stop this process.
Might stop this process.
But I don't want to get into the details of that process because it's just a bunch of nonsense.
I don't want to get into the details of that process because it's just a bunch of nonsense.
It's getting late.
It's getting late.
I want to make a very clear point here because it's terribly important in and around and about the whole process of eco-socialism.
And I want to make a very important point here because it's very
Integral to the process of eco-socialism.
integral to the process of eco-socialism.
All energy paths that involve hydrocarbons, or nuclear fuels are recipes for planetary suicide. Only path that we can live with.
The only path that we can live with
Is to go into what is given directly by nature.
is to go into what is given directly by nature.
Not immediately, but mediated through the sunshine and the winds and the sun.
Not immediately, but what is mediated by sunshine, the winds,
And so forth.
and so forth.
Now, we call that renewable.
We call that renewable.
And it is one of the major issues of our time.
And it is one of the major issues of our time.
But I tell you something about it.
But I'll tell you something about it.
Wind up. And that is this.
That is this.
We can live.
We can live.
We can live very well.
We can live very well
with renewable energy.
with renewable energy.
But
But
we can't live like this.
we can't live like this.
This has to go.
This has to go.
Take it down.
Take it down.
It's destroying us because it is energy intensive and wasteful.
It's destroying us because it's energy intensive and wasteful.
Now, the process of building an eco-socialist society in harmony with nature
The process of building an eco-socialist society in harmony with nature
is predicated on stopping the insane cancer growth of capitalism.
stopping the insane cancer growth of capitalism.
So we can have a very good life,
So we can have a very good life,
but it'll be a very different life,
but it'll be a very different
and
life,
a much better life,
and a much better life
once your head is on straight,
once your head is on straight,
and you're united with each other and united with nature.
and united with each other and united with nature.
But it's very important. It's important to realize.
But it is very important to realize,
Summarize and stop.
and I'll summarize and stop.
First of all, the given energy paths
First of all, the given energy paths
are suicidal.
are suicidal.
Alternative energy paths
The alternative energy paths
are possible,
are possible,
but
but
they require a fundamentally different,
they require a fundamentally different,
non-possessive,
non-possessive,
non-capitalist,
non-capitalist,
non-accumulation
non-accumulation
kind of life.
kind of life.
That's the returning.
That's the returning.
That's the rebuilding from the past.
That's the rebuilding from the past.
That's the great challenge.
And that's the great challenge.
I don't care if you call it eco-socialism or what.
I don't care if you call it eco-socialism or what.
We need to organize about that future.
But we need to organize about that future,
Or we won't have a future.
or we won't have a future.
That future is the most radical challenge
And that future is the most radical challenge
humanity has ever faced.
that humanity has ever faced.
10,000 years
10,000 years
building this shit.
building this shit,
And we have to start from the beginning again.
and we have to start from the beginning again.
But what a great opportunity.
But what a great opportunity.
What a thrill.
What a thrill.
We can all be part of that.
We can all be part of that.
If we're together.
If we're together,
If we're lucid.
if we're lucid,
If we reach out.
if we reach out,
If we share.
if we share,
If we use our imagination.
if we use our imaginations.
Thank you.
Thank you.